Welcome to my channel, and today I'm so glad that you're here with me because today I'm going to continue on the theme that I started in my last video, which was actually my first video I ever filmed. So today is video number 2. So today I'm going to be going over multiplication and division of fractions. So if you want to see addition and subtraction, go check out my previous video, which I will link up here if I can. If not, then I will learn how and do it next time. So check that out. Also in that video, I did a review on how to convert mixed fractions to improper fractions and vice versa. I also talked about reducing fractions. So if you want a bit of a review, check that one out at the beginning. But if not, then let's jump right into multiplication and division. So without further ado, let's have some fun. With multiplication, unlike with addition and subtraction, you do not need a common denominator in order to perform it. So that actually makes this the easiest of the 4 operations with fractions. Add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Multiplication is the most straightforward and generally the simplest, which is nice. Now, it's not wrong if you get a common denominator, you just don't need one. So simply to multiply fractions, all you do is just multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. So what that means is we're going to take 1 times 1, so that would just be 1, but I'll write it all out with the full steps. And then 2 times 4. So that would be 2 times 4. So when you multiply this out, that would be 1/8. That is fully reduced. There's nothing we can reduce both of those numbers by, so we're done with that problem. Now, one way to think of multiplication of fractions is if you think of the multiplication as the word of, this is actually saying what is half of 1/4. So I talked about pizza in my last video. I'm going to talk about it here too because fractions are very applicable on there. So what's half of 1/4 of a pizza? That would be 1/8 of a pizza. So that's the most straightforward way of multiplying fractions, and you can always do it that way. Just make sure that you're reducing at the very end, so then you're good to go. So let's try that on this one. So we end up with 9 times 2, so that's going to be 18, and then 15 times 4 is 60. Quick side note trick for you, if you ever want to multiply anything by 4, think of it as doubling the number and then doubling it again. So if I want to double 15, that's 30. Double it again, that's 60. So 15 times 4 is 60. Pretty handy little trick, and I use it all the time. But anyway, back to the problem at hand. So we have 18 over 60. This is the correct answer, but it's not fully in lowest terms yet, so we're not actually finished with this problem. So we want to find the biggest number that we can divide both of these guys by, and then we'll be done. So in this case, we can divide both of these by 6. So we're going to come up with 3/10. So 3/10 is going to be the solution to that one. 1/8 is the solution of that one. So this is a method that will always work no matter what when you're multiplying fractions. Now, when your numbers are bigger here, you tend to have a pretty big fraction to reduce here, and that's fine. You know how to reduce, but I'm going to show you a way that can make it a little bit shorter. And also, let's ignore that the writing looks like it's crooked. The board is kind of tilted so that it's, more facing me, but it does make it look like I'm writing crooked. So let's just pretend that's not happening. And let me do this problem again, but with a different method so that you can compare and contrast the two. So 9/15 multiplied by 2/4. This time we're not going to multiply straight across. We're actually going to reduce vertically before we start. Now, if you remember, we can do that in addition and subtraction as well. You can always reduce vertically on these. So let's reduce our 9 and our 15 both by 3 and our 2 and 4 both by 2. So if we divide this by 3 and 3 and 2 and 2, we're going to be left with 3/5, which is an equivalent fraction to 9/15, and then this is going to reduce to 1/2. So since these are equivalent to these, this problem is going to give us the exact same solution because it's the same problem with a lot smaller numbers. So when we multiply these straight across, we have 3 times 1 is 3, 5 times 2 is 10, and as you can see, we got the same solution. So really what it comes down to with multiplication of fractions is you either reduce at the end or you reduce before you start. Either way will get you the same solution, but once you get used to this, then it's actually very handy. So let me show you another way of reducing that we can use to help make our numbers even smaller. On this problem here, we can do it like the last one and multiply straight across, and that will always give us the right answer, and this one will give us, 168 over 64, I think, and then you can reduce that, 168 over 64, which is fine. It'll work every single time. However, let's actually show you a way to reduce it even more so that our numbers are a lot more friendly. Now, just like on the last problem, we could reduce vertically, so we can reduce the 12 and the 16. We could also reduce the 14 and the 4. That would work perfectly fine. However, what we could also do is reduce this diagonally. So I don't know if you guys have ever watched any shows where maybe it's based in New York or some big city and people live in apartments and they need like an intercom system on the wall to be able to buzz people up to their apartment so they can talk to people on the street and let them up. So let's just picture if I had an intercom right here on the wall. There would be a button on it and I could push it and talk to anybody who's downstairs or who's outside. So this is going to act as our intercom button. So what that means is that any number or person that's up top or upstairs can communicate with or reduce with any number that's on the bottom, whether that be vertically or diagonally. So the 12 and the 4 can communicate through our little intercom system. Now that also means that the 14 and the 16 can reduce as well through the intercom system. So with multiplication, only with multiplication, you can reduce diagonally, and it's extremely useful. So let me show you how that will look. So let's reduce 12 and 4 both by 4, and then 14 and 16 both by 2. So what we'll come up with here is 3 over 8 multiplied by 7 over 1. And then we can go straight across, and we'll come up with 21 over 8, which is the ultimate solution. Now again, that would have also come out of multiplying straight across initially, but it is so nice to be able to reduce before you multiply. Now you have to make sure you know when you're allowed to reduce. So you can reduce vertically and you can reduce diagonally, but you cannot, no reducing horizontally when you're multiplying or when you're adding. So you can't reduce horizontally when you're multiplying or when you're adding and subtracting. So only vertically, and vertically is okay when you're adding or subtracting as well, and diagonally when you're multiplying. So I hope that makes sense and it wasn't too wordy. But what's nice is to know that if you're not sure, then just don't reduce. When in doubt, don't do it. Just wait it out. When in doubt, wait it out. When in doubt, just reduce at the end. But if you learn when you can reduce at the beginning, very, very handy. So let's look at this next one here. As I mentioned in my last video, mixed fractions can be kind of hard to deal with because when you're multiplying by 16, are you multiplying the 3 in the 16 or the 1/4 in the 16 or both? So in order to avoid that confusion, it can be a really smooth process to be able to make this into an improper fraction and make this into a fraction, and then we'll just have two fractions that will look a lot more similar to this one here. So to make this one into improper, we're going to use the around the world technique that I talked about in my last video. So you start with the 4 and you multiply the 3, and then you continue around the world and you're going to add the 1. Now the negative here, you're actually just going to put in front of your fraction once you make it. What I will caution you against is don't do 4 times negative 3. Just do 4 times 3 plus 1, and then just stick a negative in front of your fraction. So 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 1 is 13. So that always ends up being the numerator. And then your denominator stays the exact same. So negative 13 over 4. Now to make this one into a fraction, to make any whole number into a fraction, you just put it over 1. So we're going to multiply by 16 over 1. So as you can see, we have our little intercom system here. Now that may seem kind of silly, but if this were any other symbol, if it were addition, division, subtraction, that's not an intercom symbol. So you wouldn't be able to communicate diagonally through it, but on this one we can. So we can do the 16 and the 4. So we're going to reduce those by dividing them both by 4, and then we will multiply straight across. So I'm going to write it down here. It'd be negative 13 over 1 multiplied by 4 over 1. So to multiply straight across, negative 13 times 4, using that trick I taught you earlier to multiply anything by 4, just double. So 13 doubled would be 26, doubled would be 52. So this would be negative 52 over 1, and any number divided by 1 is just itself. So our ultimate answer is negative 52. So we got 21 over 8 on this one, and negative 52 on this one. So again, as an overall recap, you can reduce vertically and diagonally, never horizontally, and then multiply straight across. But when in doubt, wait it out and just multiply straight across and reduce at the end. Either way, you'll get the same answer. So no harm, no foul. So let's talk about division next. All right, first, why might you want to wear glasses when doing math? Because they help with division. All right, math joke of the day. I got a ton of them, but that was a good one, I thought. Okay, so in order to divide fractions, the technical mathematical phrase would be that you are going to multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. That's a fancy way of saying I'm going to flip this fraction and change division to multiplication. And that is exactly what we're going to do. But before I show you that, one thing that I want to point out is you may be tempted to reduce the 10 and the 20, but you must resist because that is not an intercom symbol. Remember, only with multiplication can you reduce diagonally. So that's going to be a big fat no. So you want to make sure that you turn it into a multiplication problem first. Now multiplication wasn't too bad, which is good news because all you're going to do with division is turn it into a multiplication. Now rather than say multiply by the reciprocal every time, I have a lot more condensed of a phrase that tends to stick really well. So that phrase I'm going to use is copy dot flip. So copy dot flip. So what that means is we're going to copy the first fraction, so always copy that one, dot, so literally we're going to change division to multiplication, and flip, which means you're going to flip this fraction. You're going to take the reciprocal of it, so that would be 20 over 12. So copy dot flip rolls off the tongue really nicely as opposed to multiply by the reciprocal, but that's exactly what we're doing here. Now what's nice is we've now installed an intercom system, so since it's multiplication, now we can communicate in all sorts of directions. We could reduce vertically if we want, or diagonally through our little communication system here. We could do the 20 and 8 as well. So I am going to reduce diagonally just to remind you that you can do it here because we have the multiplication, but we can't do it here because it's not multiplied yet. So let's divide this by 2 and this by 2, and we'll divide these by 4. All right, so we're going to have 5 over 2 multiplied by 5 over 6. So what we're going to wind up with is multiply straight across, 25 over 12. So 25/12 is going to be the exact right answer. And we know that we're finished because there's nothing that we can divide both of those numbers by. Here's a handy little tip. So tip. If you have reduced everything you possibly can here, so at this step, if you look and there's nothing more you could reduce, you'll never be able to reduce here. Very, very handy. So sometimes you kind of stare at numbers and you're like, ooh, they're kind of big. Should I reduce? Well, if you can't do anything more with reducing here, you'll never be able to reduce there. So we're done. So with division, you're going to copy dot flip. Copy the first fraction, dot flip the second fraction. It always has to be in that order, and then you're going to be good to go. So this one is the same way. It looks really uncomfortable though, right? Fractions are only supposed to have 2 levels. This one has 4 levels. Fractions are only ever meant to have 2 levels. So if it's way too tall, the fraction's just way tall, it is meaning that we're dividing these fractions. So that's basically our division bar right there. So we're going to copy this one, dot, flip that one. So that's going to become copy 25/15, dot flip 5/3. And now we've installed our intercom. So that means since we're multiplying, now we can reduce our 5 and 15 and go from there. So let's divide by 5. So that'll be 1, that'll be 3. Multiplying straight across yields our solution. Actually, maybe I'll write the numbers out more detailed and then we'll multiply straight across. So 25 over 3 multiplied by 1 over 3 gives us our final answer of 25 over 9. Again, this can't be reduced, and we know that because nothing here could be reduced. So we're good to go. So I hope the copy dot flip phrase helps you to remember what it is that you're doing. I have a feeling it'll stick with you, and I hope that that will be very, very helpful. As a final wrap up here, I hope the multiplication and division make more sense now, or maybe they even make more dollars. I couldn't resist. So I hope that the intercom story and the copy dot flip phrase both really help to simplify this concept. So remember, with addition and subtraction, you do need a common denominator. With multiplication and division, you do not. Again, it isn't wrong if you get a common denominator, but you'll just end up with bigger numbers and you'll have to reduce them down at the end anyway. So remember, reduce vertically, reduce diagonally with multiplication, and then multiply straight across, and that's all there is to it. So I hope that you have a beautiful rest of the day wherever you are, and I really hope that you'll subscribe to my channel and like the video and comment with anything that you'd like me to cover. I'm so glad that you joined me today, and I can't wait to see you for the next one.